Imagine if that head trash was not there. Who would you be? What if I told you those fears were no longer a problem? What would you do? I'm Stephanie Costello, a mom of 3, wife, and avid mountaineer. Beyond all of these, I am very much like you, an average person trying to navigate this thing we call life. My goal with this podcast is to bring to light the truth about what intimacy really is. You may smile, feel called out, or learn something new. Either way, you will learn you are in control. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Elaine Martinez, a 48-year-old wife of 16 years and a mother of a 9-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. She has worked for 20 plus years in healthcare as a medical sales professional and is a loyal and committed individual who works with women's sexual health as an advocate, helping couples embrace intimacy. All right. Welcome to the Intimacy Truth Podcast, where we have Elaine here to talk to us about driving the outcomes that you want. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
You are very welcome. Oh, that makes me so happy that you're happy to be here. So I incredibly excited to have you here. And I'm incredibly excited to share your story and your journey with others. One of the things that makes me really happy about having you here is that you are still here and that you're able to have these conversations with us. So I'd love for you to share your experience on driving the outcomes that you want and it just never being a question. I've known you for a couple of years now, and the two of us are very similar in the sense of when we get our mind to something, like there's no question about it happening or not. Has happened. Done. Honestly. Right. So tell us where your journey began in the last year or so and what it's been like for you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I can't even say it's been a year. As you said, we've known each other for a while. I am, and most people, including my husband, usually categorize me as a very driven type A woman.
Yeah.
I know what I want and I go after it and generally get it, including my husband. Yeah, so I would say in relation to our discussion today, in late 2020, and actually it was the day after Thanksgiving, I started having some health problems. And as you know, women, we generally, and mothers, and we generally put things off. We're like, okay, I know something's going on, but it has to be something else. It's probably this, it's probably that. So I was kind of just listening to my body after I was having some symptoms persist for a while. And couple months later, after going back and forth with the doctor, checking on some things, it winds up, I was diagnosed with stage 3 metastatic ovarian cancer. So it came on pretty quickly and was very aggressive. And with that change to my health and to my life, it's one of those big life changes. They talk about, marriage, death, births as being the big 3 life-changing events, but having a diagnosis of a critical, disease is one of those factors as well. And I think it rates pretty high up on that list of the triad. I'm not trying to get to the death part.
Right.
So, making sure that doesn't happen. So, I needed to refocus and change a lot of my thinking to make sure, when I got this diagnosis, your head spins, of course. You think the worst, of course. And where I'm very much an optimist and can find a silver lining in anything, including COVID, because of the situation. There was a silver lining for our family and myself. I knew that I had to beat this. There was no, give me a prognosis, doctor. I'm going to beat this. And so, what did I need to do to drive that result of getting better and, being there to see my children grow up if possible. And, heaven helps me there.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing. And I want to go back to critical versus what I would like to add is chronicle or chronic, critical versus chronic. There's, I want people to know that even if you don't have a critical, potentially life ending condition, chronic conditions are also potentially life altering,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And so they both really go hand in hand. And then to take it a step deeper, how you approach each of those type of diagnosis, it cognitively, emotionally, is really important, because in order to get to that next step, in order to believe in with our soul, I think, too, bringing back to us too as women, I think I would be classified as a type A, but I'm more of an introvert than you are. You're definitely the extrovert, and I'm like the introvert version of like our personalities.
I'm your yin to your yang. It's all good.
For sure. And where was I going with that? The total brain fart there.
That's with being type A.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Getting done. So the belief, thank you. The belief of getting things done. Like I couldn't even really tell you what it is. So maybe you can tell the listeners what it is. Maybe you can share your experience on this. But once I get this information, my husband says I just jump off the cliff and I build the safety net on the way down, where he like figures out the safe way to get down, and we both get there in this, at the same destination, but his takes longer than mine usually. And so it's like there's this knowing, there's this sense of knowing and this sense of belief that whatever is happening, whatever is going to happen, whatever is in this situation, I will get to a destination and there's no questions asked. So tell me what your journey's been like in that area of your life.
So, and it's, I don't know if it's a good or a bad. So, career-wise, I'm in the healthcare industry. So and I have a science background. So, I kind of understand and need to understand, for the things that I don't know, why things happen, how they happen, or what I need to do, like mechanisms of actions and things like that. So I think that helped me along the way, but it's not something that someone who doesn't have a medical background cannot empower themselves to find out or ask. And I would highly recommend that for anything that you're facing that is life altering, whether it's health, whether it's job, careers. It can be any scope of things, but to narrow it down to, knowing what you're going up against. And I guess I'm kind of like your husband in that, like I am one of those do's and don'ts or pros and cons, and I make lists and checklists, and really knowing like, okay, whether it's fortunately or unfortunately, having people in my close inner circle who are cancer survivors or are going through it themselves, which they still are cancer survivors.
Right.
I believe that wholeheartedly. From day one, you are a survivor of your diagnosis. If not before, you just didn't know it.
Yeah.
So really just looking at that bigger picture of what do I need to do? These people who are here to help me, who should they be? Who do I need to reach out to? And how can they assist? And helping educate them too as to what's going to happen. So in my situation with my health, I was just very vocal from day one with my meeting with my oncologist. I was like, I don't know if they warned you about me, but I need to know everything. So, but he loves that about me, so it's all good.
Yeah.
And he's an amazing doctor at Mass General Hospital.
Nice.
Mass Gen Brigham down in Boston. But so from the get-go, we set a game plan that, and for everyone, it might be different. So depending on, the state of your issue, you might have time. On my side, I didn't have time to, press pause, reevaluate. It was literally within the time frame of my diagnosis to my surgery to remove my tumor. and wound up being a host of other things they needed to do medically. It was 2 weeks. So we prepared from that day one office visit. And I brought my husband in on this discussion as well. So this was during COVID. So this was, January, the beginning of January is when I met with my oncologist. My husband couldn't be there physically, but I had him on FaceTime.
Yeah.
So he was in the car listening, because you will be faced with a host of emotions when you're hearing not only the issue you have, the medical issue you have, but then also all the things they might have to do to you. And you're like, oh my God, I'm signing off on everything but the kitchen sink being removed from my body right now. And I have to be okay with that. But then with so doing, and knowing that these were all potentialities, what am I going to do after if it does happen? So for me, I planned. It was like, all right, if these things happen, this is what I'm going to have to do. But I can't let that kind of break me. I have to power through it. And honestly, and my husband laughs, and so does my doctor when I say this, but I treated it like I had a cold, right? I've got cancer. Okay, I'm going to get over it. What's your time frame? How many rounds of chemo? Okay, so you're saying by the summer, I'll be all good.
Yeah.
So that's the way I looked at it. And I mean, honestly, I had my last round of chemotherapy. I had 6 rounds at the end of June. It was June 24th. You'll never forget the day. And I was back at work, although virtually, right after the 4th of July. And I didn't have any hair, didn't have eyebrows or eyelashes. Thank God they're back and coming back. But, I did things virtually and took things slow. But it was also not so much that my job was pushing me to return. It was done so at that point because there's only so much thinking about my own condition and getting out of your own head that is healthy for you.
Yeah.
So having a focus other than HGTV and be, other people's problems and helping other patients and, people with their lives and get things that they need was helpful for me.
Yeah.
So my pushing going back when I did, where I could have stayed out longer, was if my end goal is to be healthy, then having a healthy mind was also important to me, and a focus, as well as, having a healthy body. So, but in so doing, like, you just have to be an advocate for yourself. So once again, this is being driven. So whether I was an advocate throughout, my treatment as to, okay, so I wound up having to have a colostomy, which for your viewers, if they're not sure what that is. So basically they had to take a section of my colon out that was cancerous. So, and then it was too short to reconnect so that you have normal, bodily flow.
Yeah.
So they basically squeeze a part of your colon through your abdominal muscles and put it on the outside of your body.
Yeah.
And then you have a pouch that you wear. So this is where you have your bowel movement. So I remember on the list that it was a potentiality, but when I woke up and they were like, so we had to remove your spleen and your appendix and you have a colostomy. That's all I heard after that.
Yeah.
I was devastated. I bawled. He didn't explain that it was temporary, which when I told my doctor, he did.
Yeah.
But it's still, I couldn't look at it at first.
Yeah.
They have an ostomy nurse come in and she wants to show you how to take care of it. And I was just like, I just can't right now. And so know your limits. And there will be times that you have to say no, and you won't be ready for that. And that's okay. And so while she was going through it, I was, looking at everything else on the walls in the hospital room. But halfway through it, I was just like, Elaine, grow up. And I turned and I watched and I looked at it, and she's like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. Yeah. So I just, for me, I'm like, I just have to get past things once again. If I know I'm going to have to deal with this, why am I being a baby and not looking at it right this second? Just do it. I've changed dirty diapers. I can do this. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so just being an advocate for your care, you know, the timing of, you know, my chemo, they were originally going to push it out later for me to start post recovery, and I asked for it sooner. As long as there was no harm that I was doing and that I was physically capable of going through it successfully, they agreed and saw no reason why not to. But they were going to provide me with a longer, you know, window to start the treatment. So luckily, and thank God, you know, I responded well and recovered quickly from surgery to start, you know.
Yeah, I love this. The moral of this piece to everything that you just shared is the big piece is be an advocate for yourself, and how to be an advocate is asking questions. If you're like, well, what questions do I ask? Well, who, what, when, where, why, how? Start there, right? Start with the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how, and then you get to the deeper questions. Then there's actually another piece to this that is coming up, and I think, even though I'm more of an introvert, I still have this sense of assertive communication where when I know what I know, like I'm saying it. And sometimes people say it's abrupt and it's aggressive and whatever else. Often what I realize is that's because of how they're receiving it, not because of how I'm communicating it. So there's a great book called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. And when it comes to your health and your body and anything you're craving to have, yes, there's doctors who are educated. We want to respect the people that we're working with or that are working with us. We want to respect their education, but we also deserve to be informed as people who need their service.
You are a very critical part of your care team.
Exactly.
Always remember that.
Yes, that's so awesome.
You know, and to your point, and I'm sorry, I'm having a chemo brain moment.
No worries. Asking questions and being assertive communication.
Yes. And oh, yes, thank you. So I think it's one of those things we learned as, you know, children. I want to say probably like kindergarten or elementary school, when they're like, there's no such thing as a dumb question or a stupid question. Always ask them. I mean, nothing is truer. And I think when you're speaking to someone who is, you know, whether it's a physician or your manager, someone in law, I don't care who, that you see it, that you put on a position of being an authority figure, right? Know that when you ask them questions so that you're informed to have a better conversation, a more informed and productive conversation with them, they appreciate that. It's not going to be a hindrance. And unfortunately, I feel that many times for some women that we get put into like a box of where we, you know, be respectful and be quiet and don't ask that and, you know, just listen. No, you know, it is 2021. And it's very important when you're thinking about your bodies and those little bodies, especially as moms, that, I mean, that was always in the forefront of my mind, that I have to get through this to be there for my kids and to show my kids that they can get through something like this. And of course, having that whole discussion of, you know, the C word with my children was not fun. And their experience throughout this was not fun. And honestly, they're still getting through it. Because we're still going through it. I just started my recovery, and I mean, I'm very thankful. You know, the surgery went well. They removed everything, chemo, zapped everything, and my last scans in July, there's no evidence of disease. But with this disease, because it is known as, ovarian cancer is still one of the top 5 cancers for women in the United States, that, and actually, I want to say globally, that seen as a killer. And ovarian cancer in particular is known as the silent killer. So, and it's not only because it's happening inside of our bodies and we don't know that it's happening. And unless you're going for your yearly exam, you still might not know it's happening. Unless you're feeling that pain and recognize some of the symptoms, which can easily get brushed off as anything else because it's bloating, it's being full quickly, early. So if you just start eating dinner and you're full, or you should have been eating dinner and you're like, you're not even hungry, that can be a symptom. You know, abdominal pains, pelvic pains, we easily can brush them off as, oh, they're cramps, or, you know, oh, it has to have been something that I ate, which was my first, you know, thought when I started having pains. Changes in our bowel movements. Who thinks that that can be a sign that, you know, ovarian cancer might be, you know, happening in our bodies? And, you know, heightened fatigue. We're all tired. We're all like all over the place with, you know, being a mom, a wife, even being a single person trying to juggle everything with no kids. That's still a lot that's going on in our lives, that oftentimes women were silent. And I think it's a silent killer, not just because it's hard to diagnose, but it also because women in our society have been taught to be silent and been taught to be silent about our problems, and then silent about trying to resolve them. So, you know, my hope today with our discussion is that I help others find their voice. You know, encourage, empower, you know, other women to speak to their husband, speak to their brother. It could be their wife or their daughter, because unfortunately, and honestly, it was, you know, my own ignorance at the time when I was diagnosed. I really only thought that, you know, older women get ovarian cancer. The average age of an ovarian cancer patient is 75. You know, so I was seen as being very young at 47 to have it and have it be so advanced. I mean, luckily, unluckily, I have to say luckily for me, I think that worked in my favor because I was generally healthier. I didn't have a lot of other comorbidities that can happen when we, you know, advance in age. But, you know, where was I going? See? Chemo
Voice. Yeah, it's okay. Same here too with my brain fog. Your voice, having your voice as a person, your goal in helping people have your voice, and noticing the signs. And when you think, oh, well, what's this? And then what's this? And then what's this? It's like, wait a minute, I probably should be asking more questions. You know, when I got sick, I had a day of hiking and then like crash, couldn't get out of bed, blood pressure, dizzy, almost fainting. Like I had a significant amount of rush of symptoms, but I had had symptoms prior to coming drastically all at once. I had had all these symptoms all along, and I just chalked it up to having kids and nursing and all of these different things. And I have even asked, like I had an incident as a kid that I want to investigate. And several doctors were like, there's nothing that it's causing you problems right now for, so there's no need to investigate. There's nothing to investigate. No, there is something to investigate. And lo and behold, now I have this huge significant issue that is affecting my ability to be a mom and a business owner and a wife and all the other things that I crave to be in my world, because I never actually used my voice and stood up and stood my grounds. I was like, no, I need to investigate this. I need to figure out what these symptoms are. And then my doctor even had the nerve to say, why didn't you tell me all this was happening? It's like, I thought that I did. And I always thought it was because I had children back to back and was nursing back to back, right? So now that I'm done being pregnant and I'm done nursing, my body is adjusting back to normal, and normal is not normal by any means.
And sometimes, and it's funny, because we'll explain things that are going on or trying to talk about our symptoms, but then we'll also give a rationale as to what we think it is. And I think that's one of the things where we all should just stop at that point and just say, no, these are my symptoms. I'm not going to tell you why I think it's happening, because if you say that, then they're like, oh, okay. And it can kind of get dismissed. But if we just kind of list things as, and think how like the person we're communicating with thinks. right? So this goes back to your point earlier about it not necessarily be what you're communicating, but how someone else is receiving it.
Right.
That sometimes we need to change the way we communicate so that it's received in
Where it needs to be.
where it needs to be. Exactly. Yeah. And it came back to me what my whole point was that I was saying. And that was that ovarian cancer can happen in adolescence as well. And it's not even talked about as much. And of course, the incidence is lower, but it's still something to be cognizant of, that it's not just a woman's problem, it's a female problem. Anyone with ovaries, and baby girls are born with ovaries. This can happen too, unfortunately.
Before we end, I actually want to bring up that book again that I mentioned earlier, because I think it's really important when we juice people up with this energy and this excitement. They're like, I can do this now, I have my voice. And then they go to have their voice and they're sitting in front of somebody like, shit, now do I say, right? Like they don't know how to use that assertive communication. So the book is called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. And it gives very strategic ways to communicate with somebody else who might have a different agenda, different story, different beliefs or understanding of the situation on the other end. And so when we think about, we present something to somebody, we're presenting our story, our beliefs, our pictures in our head, and then they come along and they present theirs. And it feels sometimes like it's a block in the road. Like we were on this road, now all of a sudden here's this roadblock and we can't keep going. No. Like there's a way around the roadblock. It's just about keeping on figuring out how to stay on your road. And there's certain ways to do that through repetition. And I forget what they call it in the book, but it's constantly repeating yourself. Like, I understand that's how you feel. Let me rephrase it this way, and validating the person, but then also making sure you have broken record. That's what it is. Having a broken record thing where you're like, wait a minute, let's try this again. Let's try this again. Let's try this again. And they even use an example of a woman who worked with a doctor for many years for a chronic condition, and how she was afraid that he wasn't going to change her thing, and she wanted to change it. And she had to ask 4 times before the doctor finally agreed to a shift, a compromise that they both decided to agree on. So know that once isn't enough, twice isn't enough. Try several times before you are settling with what's happening. Don't just settle with the no that you might get the first time. That's where your confidence and your belief in yourself and in your knowing really is going to do you well.
Absolutely. I think there's a statistic that it takes 20 times for a person to hear something for them to actually act on it and in fact change.
Wow.
So the more times you say it to them, and stand your ground, and my look at it with doctors, and I do respect them. When I was little, I wanted to be one.
Yeah.
But no is that, you've hired this person to take care of your health. Their goal is to get you there. So where you might have differing opinions on how to get there, it's not to say that your opinion is wrong or theirs is wrong. It's about having that right fit with that physician. And if you've tried to come to a compromise or come about with something that makes you feel better about what's going to be happening to your body, and they're not on board, fire them.
Right.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Go to another physician.
Yeah.
Be that champion for yourself. Be that advocate for your health. I belong to a support group for ovarian cancer survivors, and one fellow member shared her experience, which was similar to the example you shared, in that she's older. She had previously had a hysterectomy in her 30s. She's now in her 60s, and she was thinking after Dr. Google, which is horrible, don't do it, just try not to do it. But, was thinking that, these symptoms can be, ovarian cancer, and they poo-pooed her completely. That can't possibly be it. You don't have anything down there. So, physicians, anyone of power, they're people too.
Yeah, right.
They don't know everything. Their experience is a culmination of a lot of factors, not only like their education, but the patients that they've come into contact. And maybe they just haven't happened to have a patient like you before.
Right.
So, find someone who has.
Yeah, so true.
Would be my advice for that. But just in general, knowing that your opinion matters, your voice matters, building support around you of your family and friends is amazing and so helpful. And I'm very humbled by my experience going through this by my village. Some people who I didn't even think were that close of friends were just amazing, and have done amazing things for myself and actually for ovarian cancer research, and done fundraisers, and totally came out of the blue, and just amazing. So know that there are people out there. You might have to do a little searching to find them to help you, get to where you need. But a lot of people are willing. Mm-hmm. So where you think no one's out there for me, or no one can help me, or how do I learn to do this? Once again, use your voice, just ask. Yeah. And I'm sure you're going to find one. So
I love this.
I hope that helped.
It was amazingly helpful. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know time is the most precious thing that you have to spend right now. So I appreciate that you're willing to share how to drive the outcomes that you want with others, and how to make sure that you're getting your needs met based on what you feel you deserve.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all your viewers for watching, and good luck.